You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Joining us to continue our conversation about the election omnibus bill that passed out of the House, as well as the House Republicans walking off the floor on Wednesday, is Representative Ryan Spain. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously, you were one of the Republican representatives that walked off the floor. This whole process happens really in a day. We see this bill, the shell bill, get found, and then it goes through committee and the House floor vote in a day. House Republicans voted present on it. Why the present vote? Why the protest vote here on this particular process?
Yeah, we really wanted to call attention, and I think the word protest is exactly right. Protesting the election interference, the sham proceedings, the shenanigans delivered by Democrats here in the Capitol. And look, the Democrats control artificial supermajorities. They control everything, and yet it's never enough for them. And so all of the election tricks that we are calling attention to are on full display and worthy of just a protest and a march down to press conference on the stairs to be able to say, let's explain what's really happening here, because you're not going to get fair and credible answers on the House floor, unfortunately.
So is this about the process by which this came up? We typically see that whole thing happen on May 31st, but not on May 1st. But
Sure.
Is this about the process? Is this about the substance of the bill itself, or is it about a mix of both?
It really is about both. And you know, the process is broken here in Springfield. That's why we need checks and balances. We need to bring better parity and representation to our government here. One absolute power controlling party running every aspect of our government doesn't serve the people of Illinois well. And yesterday was an example of the process being wrong. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last time. But the substance of this legislation matters too. Here you have election interference, voter suppression, preventing competition in our elections being masked as some advisory questions, all of which will pass with overwhelming majorities that I think we all instinctively know the answer to. So it's very, very disingenuous.
Where does the voter suppression come in on
The
this?
voter suppression comes from the inability to have candidates competing in our elections. Illinois has always allowed for vacancies in our elections if there is not a major party running, either as a Republican or a Democrat. In any district in the state of Illinois, parties have an opportunity to place a candidate on the ballot through a process we call slating. It's a tool to make sure we can have more competition in our elections and that voters can actually have a choice. Voters deserve to have a choice of who they should vote for in all of our legislative districts throughout the state of Illinois.
There was a conversation, though, about that slating process as it being a way for parties to circumvent the primary process altogether. And I get in a vacuum, it does do that. A person's able to make it to the general election ballot without having to go through a primary, without giving voters the choice on them or the knowledge of them leading up to that leading up to the general election cycle. Does it? I guess I know there's all of the other factors about this, but specifically the part about the slating process, does that not open up the process a little bit better and put more power from the people rather than the party?
I think if you want to make a future change to how elections are run and say there will not be an opportunity to place candidates on the ballot after the primary, I'm okay with that. But that will be the rules in place for that election. When you come through in the middle of an election cycle and change the rules, as people are out here today, right now over this weekend, collecting signatures. Remember, you still collect signatures, you go through an authentication process. It's not like you're plucking names out of a hat and assigning people to the ballot. There is a legitimate process to go through, and anyone that's slated has to go out and collect signatures just like anyone that competes in the primary election. When you change the rules of the game in the middle of the election, that's where I call it fundamentally unfair. And again, it's so disingenuous of Democrats and quite frankly just reeks of hypocrisy, talking about nationally about election interference and voter suppression. We see it on full display each and every day here with the absolute power and control that I guess is not enough, because now we're going to prevent candidates who are giving a good faith representation to the rules that were established for this election, and they are going to have their opportunity to appear on the ballot squelched by the Democrats.
Do you think there was a specific reason why this was pushed through that now specifically? There's been conversations about voter turnout because of referendum questions, but also that slating process. There were plenty of districts across Illinois where Republicans did not have a primary in a Democrat-controlled district. There's expectations for slatings to come through. There's also the opportunity for Democrats to slate somebody in a Republican district. I just wonder, do you think this was in response to a specific place in this whole process, or I guess why in the middle of this process was it so important to get this done, all of those other changes?
It's a great question, and I do think there are specific legislative races in the state of Illinois that are believed to be competitive, and you can avoid a competitive election by changing the rules of the game in the middle of the cycle. And I think it's unfair, I think it's unconstitutional, I think it's unlawful, and I expect this to be fully litigated. It sure deserves to be. Again, if you want to make changes for future elections, that's one thing. But to change the rules of the game, I mean, just be like if we were playing a board game at home and you change the rules and throw it overboard. I mean, this is pouting and childish behavior from a group of people that control every aspect of our government in the state of Illinois. And here we are just trying to deliver balance and competition to our elections. I think it's a good thing. I think voters deserve choices, whether they follow the traditional primary process or this established slating process. Both are okay, and you can't change the rules of the game in the middle of an election.
All right, well, Representative Ryan Spain, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.